Demonic encounters don't always happen the way people imagine. There aren't always dramatic signs, no spinning crosses, no distorted voices echoing through a room. Sometimes it's just a presence where nothing should be, a voice repeating something you just said, a body that no longer responds to the person who should be controlling it. Today, I'm going to tell 3 stories like that. A forest with rules no one ever wrote down, books that create a kind of supernatural dependency, and a real possession. Let's start with the forest and the thing they found there. That winter wasn't just cold. It sank into your bones. We woke up every morning with tight chests, coughing that wouldn't go away. The firewood had been running low for weeks, and that does something to your head. Someone in the house always seemed a little worse each day. It wasn't drama. It was the kind of situation where you feel things will turn serious if you don't act. And when it reaches that point, you start accepting ideas that would have felt unthinkable before. Everyone in the area knew you didn't go into that forest. There were no signs, no fence, no guards, and no clear explanation either. It was just an old rule, passed down without discussion. People said, "Don't go in there," and that was it. Anyone who asked too many questions was seen as a problem. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was silence. And where I grew up, silence carried more weight than warnings. I remembered a man who had gone into that forest years earlier. Not to steal anything big, just wood like I was planning to do. He came back the same day, but he wasn't the same. Thinner, quieter. He walked past people without looking at them. He never explained what he saw. He never talked about what happened. He died a few years later and no one ever asked. That was part of the rule too. Even so, I decided to go. It wasn't sudden. The idea dragged on for days. First as a thought, then as an excuse, until it felt like a decision. I kept telling myself it would be quick. Just fallen wood. Just enough to get us through a few more days. No going too deep, no taking more than necessary. I made myself a promise, as if promises still meant anything there. The moment I crossed into the forest, I felt it. I can't explain it cleanly. The sound changed. It didn't disappear, but it felt distant, like it was being swallowed. The wind still moved, but it didn't seem to touch anything. Even my footsteps sounded wrong, muted, heavy. It felt like I had stepped into a place that didn't respond to the world the same way. After a few minutes, what really bothered me was the absence of life. No birds, no insects, no distant sounds. Not even the crack of a dry branch giving way under its own weight. Nothing. Just my breathing and my boots against the ground. The more I noticed it, the heavier the silence became. That's when I saw my neighbor. I didn't expect anyone else to be there, and the relief was immediate. Not because I felt safe, but because I wasn't alone anymore. He looked at me the same way I looked at him. It wasn't surprise, it was recognition. Neither of us asked why the other was there. We didn't need to. We started speaking quietly without ever agreeing to it. Short, practical comments, no jokes, no small talk. Every sentence felt unnecessary in that place. Raising your voice felt like a way of calling attention, even if you didn't know to what. Neither of us said that out loud. We just did the same thing. We started working. The axe hit the wood, the logs split, but no one relaxed. I kept glancing over my shoulder without realizing it. He did the same. The sound of metal hitting wood echoed wrong, like it came back altered. At some point, there was a loud crack nearby. It wasn't the axe, it wasn't wood falling, it was sharp. Close. We both stopped at the same time and stared at the same spot between the trees. There was nothing there, no movement, no explanation. We stood still for a few seconds. That's when I thought about leaving. Then I looked at the wood on the ground, thought about the cold at home, and kept going. The work stopped without warning. I don't remember which of us noticed first. My body understood before my mind did. The axe froze midair. My breathing caught on its own. A few yards away between the trees, there was a black goat standing still. Small, thin, legs planted firmly on the ground. It didn't move. It just watched. It didn't look scared or curious. It looked present. What bothered me first was the way it stood there. Animals don't stop like that. They shift. They calculate escape. That goat did none of it. It didn't lower its head, didn't blink, didn't shift its weight. It was as if it had appeared already finished, placed there deliberately, exactly between the two of us. My neighbor muttered something about it being just an animal. I agreed too quickly. It was easier than thinking anything else. A goat in that region wasn't impossible. A black one either. The problem wasn't what it was how it behaved. Still, we told ourselves it was just food walking toward us. When we stepped closer, it didn't react. No retreat, no panic. That's when my stomach tightened, not from hunger, but from the feeling that we were doing something wrong. The feeling didn't come from the forest. It came from me. We grabbed the sack without saying a word. The decision happened quietly, automatically. When we put the goat inside, it didn't struggle. No kicking, no sound, no resistance. The sack closed too easily, almost like it was empty. My body noticed that before my mind did. We started walking back, carrying the sack between us. At first, the weight made sense, heavy but manageable. We walked a few steps, trying not to think about the silence coming from inside. No breathing, no movement. Then, too soon to be imagination, the sack started to pull harder. Not all at once. Gradually, a little heavier, then more. My arm protested and I adjusted my grip, thinking it was fatigue. I looked at my neighbor. He did the same thing. Neither of us spoke. With every step, the sack felt denser, not just heavier, present. The fabric stretched in a way that didn't match a small body. My shoulder burned. My arm went stiff. It felt like carrying something that kept rearranging itself inside. My neighbor tried to laugh, a short, dry sound that died halfway through. He didn't finish it, just shook his head like he was pushing a thought away. That's when I knew it wasn't just me. We stopped, not by agreement, because our bodies wouldn't go on. The sack pulled downward as if it had crossed some physical limit. My arm shook. The silence of the forest felt closer now, almost pressing in. That's when something pushed against the fabric from inside. It wasn't a kick. It wasn't sudden. It was slow, firm, like something testing the resistance. The sack didn't tear. There was no sound of bone or hooves, just confirmation. There was strength inside. My stomach turned. My neighbor let go for a second, then grabbed it again, like letting go would be worse. Then it spoke, not a growl, not a scream. It repeated in my own muffled voice, "This cold isn't going away." The exact words I had said 10 minutes earlier. Same tone, same pause. Neither of us moved, not by choice. It felt like our bodies had forgotten how. Time stretched strangely. I didn't think about running, or praying, or anything. I just stood there holding the sack, hoping it wouldn't say anything else. When the weight increased again, I acted without deciding. I released one hand, pulled my gun, and fired into the sack. Not aiming at anything specific, just to break the moment, to make it stop. The shot echoed sharply through the trees. The sack dropped to the ground. Too light, too empty. No blood, no body, no smell. The fabric collapsed like it had never held anything at all. I looked inside with my heart in my throat. It was empty, not torn, not stained, just empty. After that, neither of us spoke. We couldn't. The sack on the ground felt too light to justify what had happened. Looking at it felt wrong, like staring at a place something had just left. I didn't feel relief. I expected to, but it didn't come. What came instead was the certainty that it wasn't over. My neighbor looked at me and I knew he felt the same. Not fear, registration. Like something had been recorded. We headed back without saying a word. Each of us carried what we could. The sack stayed where it fell. No one suggested taking it. The way out felt longer, even though it was the same path. Every step felt watched, quietly. At one point, I wanted to look back. I didn't. Not because I was brave, but because I knew I'd confirmed something I didn't need confirmed. The forest wasn't blocking us. If anything, the way out felt too open. That bothered me more. When we left the forest, the sound returned gradually. Wind, distant noise, normal life. That return felt worse than the silence, like the forest had stopped paying attention. Not because it lost interest, but because it had seen enough. I noticed it only at home while changing clothes. The smell. Not strong, but soaked in. Cold dampness. Earth that shouldn't have been there. Something old and organic. I washed my hands. Then again. The smell stayed, like it had sunk under the skin. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt a presence standing somewhere in the room, just outside my field of vision. I didn't see anything, didn't hear anything, but my body never relaxed. In the days that followed, I avoided talking about it. My neighbor did the same. When we crossed paths, our eyes met briefly. Empty. No need to coordinate a story. Lying wouldn't have served any purpose. I never went back to that forest. Not because of fear. Fear fades. What stayed was something else. The certainty that we weren't stopped from entering or leaving. We were allowed. And that changes everything. The next story doesn't happen somewhere far away. It happens at home. In a normal room, and it starts with someone who thought they were just reading, until they realized the room wasn't empty anymore. My interest in demonology never had anything to do with faith or fear. It was curiosity, historical, almost academic. I liked understanding how certain ideas survived for centuries, how names and symbols repeated across different cultures. I treated it like something distant, something that existed on paper, not in real life. I didn't believe studying any of it could have practical consequences. To me, it was just information. The first book was an impulse buy. I saw it in a small shop, one of those places that sells old things without much organization. It wasn't cheap, but it didn't seem rare enough to justify suspicion. The first time I opened it, I felt a quick, dry wave of nausea. It passed almost immediately, but the room felt strange for a few seconds, like the air had suddenly gotten too heavy. I closed the book and ignored it. That night, I brought it into my bedroom. I read in bed with a dim light, more out of habit than real interest. At some point, I became aware of the feeling of being watched. Not fear, just irritation, like something in the room was wrong, even if nothing looked different. I kept reading because there was no concrete reason to stop. When I fell asleep, I dreamed I was in my bedroom. Everything was exactly the same. The bookshelf, the bed, the chair. In the dream, I was reading the book, but the pages were blank. No text, no symbols, no drawings. Just one sentence in the center of the page. You're reading again. I woke up with my heart racing, but I told myself it was suggestion, nothing more. Over the next few days, I started buying other books. Not because I needed them, because I felt a strange need to complete something. Without thinking about it, I arranged them on the shelf the same way every time. Same order, same spacing, same section of the shelf. It felt automatic, almost comforting. Only later did I realize I couldn't remember the exact moment I decided to do it. The first nights after that, I started hearing dry noises, small cracks coming from the shelf, always from the same spot. Not loud enough to scare me, but too consistent to ignore. I got up more than once to check. Nothing was ever out of place. Old wood reacting to the cold, I told myself. One night, my mother stepped into my room without knocking. She stood there for a few seconds, then backed out quickly, saying it felt cold in there, like she couldn't breathe properly. She didn't say anything else. I didn't push. She's always been sensitive to atmosphere, and I didn't want to feed it. The second night, I barely slept. I woke up with the clear feeling that someone had crossed through the room. I didn't see anyone, but the air felt displaced, like right after someone walks through a tight space. I got up and walked to the closet mirror, and I saw something that made my stomach tighten. There was a shadow behind me that didn't match my movement. I blinked, shifted. It didn't respond. When I turned fully, there was nothing there. After that, the dream started repeating without warning. Same setting, same angle. I was in my room, awake, reading. The bookshelf was open, even when I knew I'd closed it before sleeping. The chair was slightly out of place, like someone had used it. Nothing else happened, and maybe that was why it was so disturbing. It was my room, but it no longer felt like mine. In one of those dreams, the sentence changed. The pages were still blank, but now it said, "You keep reading." No threat, no sarcasm, just neutral observation. I woke up with the feeling that the dream hadn't ended when I opened my eyes, like it had only been interrupted, and it was still happening somewhere. I stayed awake the rest of the night trying to understand why it bothered me so much. During the day, I started noticing things at the edge of my vision. Pale, long hands, not full figures, fragments, a shape for half a second, then nothing the moment I looked directly. I blamed it on stress, lack of sleep. Still, I stopped looking at the bookshelf unless I had to. At night, the cold began to concentrate in one specific place in the room. Not the whole room, just the side of my bed closest to the shelf. It was precise, localized, like the air there had a different temperature than the rest. I changed blankets, closed the windows, checked the heater. Nothing changed. That cold stayed exactly where it wanted to stay. That's when I heard the voice for the first time. Not a loud voice, not dramatic. A low whisper, flat, without emotion. It didn't sound like it came from a corner. It didn't sound like it traveled through air. It was just there. It said only, "You're here." No follow-up, no second sentence, nothing. I stayed still, waiting for proof I'd imagined it. Not long after that, my mother started dreaming too. She doesn't usually talk about dreams, but that week she mentioned, casually, that someone stood in the hallway at night, facing my room, just standing there, watching. She said it like it was nothing, like a detail. I didn't know what to say. The idea that it wasn't confined to my space bothered me more than any shadow ever had. The first physical signs came soon after. I woke up with thin scratches on my arms, too neat to be an obvious accident. Not bleeding, not painful, just there. I tried to find a practical explanation. Nothing made sense. I didn't tell my mother. I didn't want to give her a shape to attach to what she was already feeling. Some nights I felt something sit on the edge of my bed. I didn't see anyone. I didn't hear steps, just the unmistakable shift of weight, the mattress sinking for a few seconds. I would lie there with my eyes open, breathing slowly, waiting for it to leave. It always did, but never fast enough to calm me down. I tried leaving the house for a few days, pretending I was just busy. I slept on friends' couches, stayed late at the library, found reasons not to go home. But the anxiety didn't fade. It got worse. Because I kept thinking about the room, about the shelf, about the books. Distance didn't make it smaller, it made it louder. When I finally went back, I walked straight into the bedroom and opened one of the books without thinking. And the moment I started reading, I felt immediate relief. Not happiness. Cessation. The cold faded. The pressure in the room lifted. The atmosphere loosened. Nothing happened that night. And that bothered me more than anything else had, because it showed me the pattern. When I read, the room stayed quiet. When I closed the book, something moved. The chair creaked on its own, the air thickened. The silence changed shape. It didn't take many nights for me to understand what was happening. Reading wasn't curiosity anymore, it was containment. I started reading just to sleep, not for pleasure, for necessity. My nights began organizing themselves around it. One more page, one more chapter, anything to keep the room stable. And when exhaustion finally won, short, neutral phrases would appear in my mind like they weren't mine. It's better this way. Keep going. When I tried to pack the books up to get rid of them, I felt pressure in my chest so strong I had to sit down. It wasn't pain, it was resistance, like my body was being warned that this wasn't an option. I sat on the floor surrounded by open boxes, breathing shallow, hands shaking. That's when I realized I no longer had control over what I'd started. One night I woke up with certainty. Something had changed. No noise, no dream cut off. The room was silent in a way that felt compressed. The hallway light was off. The shelf was there. The chair was there. Everything looked too normal. Then I noticed something. The chair wasn't empty. There was a presence sitting in it, leaning forward, hands resting on an open book. Reading. I didn't need my eyes to adjust. The silhouette was clear against the dark wall. It didn't lift its head when I opened my eyes. It didn't need to. The scene had no urgency at all, and that's what froze me. I tried to move and couldn't. My body felt heavy, pinned to the mattress. This wasn't sleep paralysis the way people describe it, because I could feel everything. The fabric of my shirt, the cold air, the weight of my own arm. My breathing turned shallow, but panic didn't even arrive properly. It was more like reaction had been removed as an option. Nothing in the room reacted to it being there. No objects fell. No shadows shifted. The shelf didn't crack. The chair didn't squeak. The room functioned as if this was part of the routine, like I had woken up in the middle of something that had started before me. At some point, the hallway light turned on. My mother had gotten up for water. The moment that line of light slipped through the door crack, the chair was empty. No exit. No movement. 1 second. Occupied. Next second. Vacant. The book stayed open on the seat. I closed my eyes and waited for morning. I didn't sleep, I didn't move. I just let time pass. When daylight finally came, the room looked the same, but the emptiness had changed. It wasn't absence anymore. It was occupation. In the days that followed, I couldn't enter the room without checking the chair first. Not because I expected to see something, but because I didn't want to confirm that it had become routine. That's when I decided to get rid of the collection. Not all at once, gradually, quietly. Like I didn't want to draw attention. I sold some, donated others, threw out what I could. But the dreams continued. I still saw pages turning, even after the shelf was empty. An empty shelf didn't mean silence. The room never felt truly empty again. Sometimes I'd step inside and get the feeling I was interrupting something. I'd see nothing, hear nothing, but the sensation was clear, like the space had been reorganized for another purpose and I was just passing through it. Eventually, I stopped thinking about it as demons, or names, or punishment. I thought about habit, repetition, something that had gotten used to me. I don't know what it was, I only know it never fully left. And the problem with some things is they don't arrive all at once. They settle in. But not all stories work that way. The next one is different. It's not about someone trying to understand what's happening. It's about several people seeing the same thing and realizing they can't do anything about it. 3 adults couldn't hold Maribel down that night. She was small, thin, but in that moment, her body didn't recognize physical limits anymore. I was living in that area temporarily for work. It was rural and isolated, surrounded by forest and mountains, where the silence felt permanent. The roads were long and empty. At night, you barely saw any lights. It wasn't a place that felt immediately scary, but it also wasn't a place that invited you to stay. Everything felt far from the rest of the world, even time. The place I was staying was a simple cabin set back from the main road. No nearby neighbors, just trees and uneven ground all around it. At night, the quiet was so constant that any small sound stood out. It wasn't peaceful quiet. It was quiet that felt like it was listening. The closest family lived a little further out. They were Honduran. They spoke limited English, but they were always polite, quiet, not the type to ask questions or get overly friendly. They kept a distance like people do when everything is temporary. That's how I met Maribel. She was the children's aunt. Small woman, thin. Always looked tired, she didn't talk much. Usually sat down and watched more than she participated. She didn't look sick, just worn out. There was something about her that drew your attention without making noise. From the beginning, I felt a strange discomfort around that property. Not fear exactly, more physical than emotional. Like the air carried a light weight to it. A constant sense that the place wasn't neutral. I never said that to anyone. It sounded too subjective to turn into a conversation. The first incident happened suddenly. Maribel collapsed while we were talking outside. No warning, no stumble. She just dropped. White foam appeared at the corner of her mouth. It was fast and violent. Everyone rushed in, trying to figure out what was happening. What was strange was what didn't happen. It wasn't a typical seizure. No obvious repeated convulsions. No long, rigid episode. When it ended, Maribel was conscious, confused, alive. Later, medical tests didn't show anything that explained it. Not long after that, the kids started talking. They said they'd seen a girl dressed in white near the house, mostly at night. They said it casually, like it was just part of the environment. The adults brushed it off as imagination. No one wanted to give it weight. Maribel started changing slowly. Long stretches of silence, staring at a fixed point without reacting. Not sad, not scared, just distant. Sometimes we'd call her name and she'd take too long to respond, like she was coming back from somewhere far away. That worried everyone more than the collapse. A few days later, Maribel told us what she was seeing. She said a little girl appeared at night, standing in the corner of her room, never moving, never speaking, just standing there. And Maribel described it without emotion, like she was talking about a noise outside. She said it didn't feel like a normal child. One night she told us something worse. The girl had changed into a black cat, not gradually. 1 second, child. Next second, animal. No transition. In that version, the cat walked closer to the bed, and Maribel said she understood something without anyone explaining it. It wanted something. Then it spoke to her, not with a normal voice, more like a message that didn't come from a throat. It said, "I'll be back." That was it. No threat, no yelling, just a statement, like an appointment. After that, Maribel refused to sleep alone. Not like someone being dramatic, like someone certain. She said that when she was alone, it came back. That's when everyone understood something was wrong, even if no one knew what. It wasn't the kid's imagination anymore. It wasn't an isolated incident. A pattern was forming, and no one knew how to stop it. The first violent episode happened at night with no build-up. Maribel was sitting down when her body started moving wrong, like the commands weren't coming from the right place anymore. She threw herself into the table, knocked a chair over, hit the floor. It wasn't pain. It was complete loss of control. We tried to hold her, but she fought with enough force to push people off. It took 3 adults to keep her from hurting herself, and even then it wasn't easy. Her arms shoved with steady power, no pauses, no coordination, but strength. That scared people more than screaming ever could. During those episodes, her eyes changed. Not anger, not panic, empty, wide open, fixed, like she was looking through people instead of at them. We called her name over and over. There was no recognition. It was like trying to talk to someone who had already left the room. In one attempt to restrain her, she started scratching her own face. Hard, like she couldn't feel pain, like she was trying to remove something from herself. We grabbed her hands before she could do serious damage. The worst part was the silence. No crying, no pleading, nothing human. That's when someone suggested spiritual help, not out of deep religious conviction, out of lack of options. Someone brought holy water, a rosary, a few simple religious items. Nothing elaborate. The reaction was immediate. Maribel started screaming, spitting, trying to bite anyone who got close. Her body bent in ways that didn't look right, like it rejected those objects physically. And the words coming from her mouth didn't match who Maribel was. Broken phrases. No quiero. It's watching. It won't leave. Spanish. English. Pieces of Portuguese. Sounds that didn't fully become words. Somewhere between a growl and a laugh. It wasn't a clear message. It was fragments. And it didn't help us understand. It only confirmed that something else was pushing through. The room started responding too. Objects fell with no clear explanation. Doors slammed even without wind. The air felt heavy, hard to breathe. It didn't happen continuously. It came in waves. Every spike in Maribel's episode came with a shift in the environment around her. No one could pretend anymore. They called friends who had experience with group prayer, not priests, not official leaders. Just people used to praying in groups. used to helping when things got bad. They arrived exhausted but determined. No one looked comfortable with what they were seeing, but no one left. Everyone understood it required presence. The prayers started simple, and every name spoken produced a different reaction. Sometimes Maribel's body arched, sometimes she screamed. Other times she went completely still, like a switch had been flipped off. There was no clean pattern, only response. During some episodes she vomited. It wasn't food. It was a dark, thick liquid, like something was being pushed out of her from deep inside. After that, for a few minutes, she seemed present again. She looked around confused, asked where she was, had no memory of what had happened. Those moments were too brief to feel like relief. The exhaustion built fast. None of us slept properly. Nights blurred into days. Everyone moved slower, spoke less. But no one left her alone. It was clear that wasn't an option. Fear stopped being individual, became shared. It wasn't about what Maribel felt or saw anymore. It was about what all of us had witnessed together. Every person in that house had seen something they couldn't erase later. That created a bond that didn't feel good. It felt like a record. At one point, after another long round of prayer, Maribel went completely still. She didn't move, didn't react. We thought she'd passed out, but her breathing was regular. We stood there watching, waiting for the next wave. Nothing happened. When she finally opened her eyes, she was calm. She looked around like she didn't recognize the room at first. Then she asked why everyone was there. She didn't remember the episodes, the screaming, the prayers, the violence. For her, time had jumped forward, but the house didn't go back to normal. The weight in the air was gone, but something else replaced it, an emptiness that felt wrong, like something had been removed quickly, without care. The rooms felt bigger and hollower. People spoke quietly even when there was no need. No one wanted to be the first person to act like it was over. In the days that followed, Maribel stayed calm. She ate, she talked, she helped with basic tasks. No fear, no confusion. Just a deep, quiet fatigue, like someone recovering from something too long. But she still avoided being alone at night. She didn't beg for company. She just positioned herself near where other people were. That's when people in the area started talking. Once word spread, locals started mentioning older things, unexplained deaths, strange accidents, stories that had never been taken seriously, nothing detailed, just enough to create a pattern. That land wasn't neutral. A few days later, we woke up to a sharp crash. A tree had fallen near the house. There wasn't strong wind, no heavy rain. The wood looked healthy, no obvious rot. It was the same tree where the kids said they saw the girl in white. No one needed to say anything. We all understood the message. The family decided to move not long after. No long debate, no attempt to adapt. It was practical, fast. They packed what they could and left. Maribel didn't argue. She accepted it like she already knew there was nothing left to do there. The house was empty overnight. Even after they left, more stories surfaced. People who had lived there before shared similar experiences. Always fragmented, always treated as isolated at the time. A figure at night. An animal that didn't behave normally. A period of illness with no cause, nothing conclusive. Enough to stay in your head. I went back to my routine after that, but I didn't come back the same. Before, I always treated possession stories as exaggeration, cultural or religious performance. That experience didn't make me devout. It didn't turn me into a superstitious person. It only removed the certainty that everything can be explained from a safe distance. Because I was there, and I watched it happen. Sometimes I still dream about that house, not about Maribel, not about the episodes. I dream about someone standing in the corner of a room, completely still, watching. I never see a face. Nothing ever happens beyond that. And I always wake up with the feeling that the dream isn't entirely mine. What happened there didn't leave me answers. It didn't leave names or definitions. It only left the certainty that some things choose where to act and choose who they touch. Maribel wasn't random. She was the available point. I don't know what was in that place. I don't know where it came from or where it went. I only know that when everything ended, it didn't feel defeated. It felt satisfied, like it had done exactly what it came there to do. If you're drawn to stories like this, you can subscribe to hear more. Leave a like if you want more accounts like these. And if you want to keep going right now, the video on screen continues with stories like this.